with a nuclear weapon. Now that question is before Congress. Joining us to discuss is the Democratic representative from Connecticut, Congressman Jim Himes, a member of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, it is great to have you. A lot of details coming out. I'm sure you're still going through it. From what you've seen, what do you think of this historic deal?
Well, it's a good moment to sort of step back and take a deep breath. This is a very complicated thing with profound consequences for a roiled region, for our national security, and the first thing people need to do is take a deep breath. Anybody who has come out in the last 2 hours with aggressive statements that this is a no-brainer, that it's obvious, frankly should stop being listened to for the duration of this consideration. These are hugely consequential, war and peace type items. Secondly, it's a complicated thing. I always knew this deal wasn't going to be anything that we were going to celebrate. It is, in fact, a compromise. And so we need to get into the details and satisfy ourselves that, in fact, Iran is going to be a lot further away from having a nuclear weapon than they were before, and this is a key point, and that we have an ability both to see cheating if it happens, that's essential, but also to bring back significant pain through sanctions if, in fact, they do cheat. And lastly, and this is really critical too, and nobody's talking about it, you never choose in Congress between the good and the perfect. You choose between the alternative you have and all the other scenarios. So we've got to start a conversation about what happens. Let's just imagine that Congress says no to this thing. Where does that leave us? In particular, if our other allies say yes. So these are all really complicated things that we need to take up and be very serious about in the coming days.
Congressman, we appreciate your no hot take mandate. But there are critics who say, and this is not a hot take, they've been looking at this deal for some time, that it's undeniable this will make Iran richer. This will give them $100 billion perhaps that they do not have or did not have yesterday. Are you concerned that they're going to take that money, even some of it, and continue their sponsorship of terrorism?
It is undeniable that this will make Iran richer, and that's one of the very significant risks associated with this deal, which again, therefore means we ought to be very, very careful in its consideration rather than, coming right out and having very strong black and white statements. But it is undeniable that this will make Iran richer, and that is a problem. It will also, as the Secretary pointed out, and again, we all have to look at this thing, it will also, presumably, and again, we've got to look at make Iran a lot further away from having a nuclear bomb than they were before. The money is what they get. What we get, of course, is the removal, at least immediately, of the possibility that Iran has a weapon, and of course the possibility, and here we look at this with a great deal of cynicism, and we are not naive about it, but the possibility that interacting more with the world, trading, actually having a more reasonable society actually begins to change that regime from a pariah regime to a more constructive participant in the region. Now, obviously, that is far from a no-brainer, but we got to consider that as a possibility.
Now, one of the details in here that's getting a lot of attention is the UN arms embargo. The fact that you're going to see a lifting of an arms embargo in 5 to 8 years. We're talking about conventional weapons. We're talking about the country's ballistic missiles program. The Democratic ranking member on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Eliot Engel, he released a pretty blistering statement saying that the fact that the arms embargo, this was one of the issues that was off the table. This was, maybe it was described as a red line. This was off the table for a long time. Now that it's included seeing that it's included in the sanctions relief is deeply troubling. Even Ash Carter, the president's defense secretary, has said that he has huge concerns allowing the arms embargo to be lifted. Do you think it's a good idea?
No, it's not a good idea. And again, this is a deal, right? That means that we get some things and they get some things. And it's uncomfortable to think, as we talked about before, that they get a whole lot of money that they may use, by the way, to try to buy off their middle class, to try to, help their economy and get their people a little less angry than they are. But they also will probably use it to further their own aims in the region. And, of course, the prospect of weapons going in is not a happy prospect. It's something that probably makes the Russians and the Chinese and maybe even the French, who probably want to sell them weapons, happy. But no, that's a very real concern. But again, we have to remember what the core negotiation was about here, which was taking away Iran's ability to develop a nuclear weapon. Look, when we negotiated with the Soviet Union, very, very bad actor. They sponsored terrorism. They oppressed Jews in the Soviet Union. They had proxy armies all over the world. But we considered it worthwhile to negotiate with them narrowly on the topic of nuclear weapons and ICBMs, and we did that. We just need to remember that this is a deal, and we're not going to get everything away that we want, and they're going to get some of the things that they want.
You'll have an interesting 60 days ahead of you. Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks so much, Congressman.